Thank you very much. That's the first thing that I have to say, is rather than my name, because you now know my name, I have to say thank you very much to Fiona for inviting me. And I also have to, maybe Stuart and I really need to confess that it might feel like we come from different parts of the country, but actually Stuart used to live about 5 minutes walk away from me, and our children were at school together. Yes, so you know No, I heard the name and I thought, I wonder if that's the same Stuart Gowdy, and he did exactly the same. I wonder if that's the same Alex MacKenzie. So yes, it was. So I'm sorry to say I don't have any PowerPoint. I don't tend to think in terms of technology.
I only did that, Alex, because we got a ram down our throat. Like, I gave all my PowerPoints to my wife to look through them and pick out the ones that she thought would be most helpful, because I just didn't have the time. There was so much stuff.
But I've made up for it by maybe bringing a whole load of stories with me, which you're sitting in the middle of. Not all of them, I have to say. There are more Godly Play stories than this, but this was what would just go in the boot of my car for yesterday. I'm going to apologise in advance because I'm probably going to play with this microphone, and if I do, will you just give me a row? Okay. So, as Fiona said, my name's Alex MacKenzie. I'm the lead trainer with Godly Play Scotland. And I've been doing Godly Play for about 11 years now, and that's more important than me being a trainer. I've been doing Godly Play with a group of children in my church. I'm an elder at Cramond Kirk, which is in the northwest of Edinburgh, just right on the shores of the Forth. And I'm one of these people that Stuart was talking about a little while ago, who was always looking for something new to do. We need to be doing something new. The only way that we can keep this alive is if we're doing something new, and we're keeping things going, and we're refreshing ourselves. I was always one of those people. I'm probably a minister's worst nightmare. I don't want to use this, I don't want to use that. Maybe not really. And so Godly Play was one of those things. Our Presbytery children's worker came along and said, I have this new thing, it's called Godly Play, and we were, yeah, come and show us it. Except that day I didn't really want to go because I had a pile of ironing, and I had 2 kids at home, and I was on my own, and I was kind of, oh. And I worked for one of the financial services companies in Edinburgh, and things were just a little bit busy, so I wasn't very sure. And I went along to this thing, and it kind of blew my mind, and that's why I'm here today, to tell you about it, because we've been doing this for 11 years. I've never done anything for 11 years before in my life. So what is Godly Play? For Church of Scotland Presbyterians, I think godly and play together as 2 words just do not go. Just do not go. Yeah, just add the Presbyterian in there, and it just doesn't work at all. Can't think of anything different to call it. So if by the end of today you have a different name, I would be really pleased to hear that. Godly Play is one of these things that is actually very difficult to speak about, which in 45 minutes' time you're not going to believe that I said that right at the beginning of this. Because it's something that is better experienced than spoken about. It's very experiential. So it's a methodology, a movement of Christian education and maybe spiritual development or spiritual direction for children of all ages.
Great.
So it has some roots in childhood spirituality. And I'm kind of hoping that you've all been children and you've all had a childhood at some point. I know that there are some children who at 2 are definitely acting like they're 35, and they're maybe a bit different. Yeah, I used to have one of those at home, and she's still not 35, but that's the way she acts. But it is getting back to that childhood spirituality. And in the roots of that, godly play thinks about those spiritual experiences that we maybe have as children and those connections that we have with God as children. Maybe not the God of power that's in the church. Maybe this is a different spiritual God. And there is some research that backs this up. In fact, there's quite a lot of research that backs this up. And godly play is very definitely founded in that research. I don't know if any of you were ever made read this book, but Rebecca Nye is a psychologist and a researcher into childhood spirituality. And even unchurched children, she says, know God. So this is tapping into that, knowing God. Not being told about God, but knowing God. So that might have been some of where my I want to try something new all of the time came from. I don't have a degree in theology. I've got a technology degree. They probably don't really sit very neatly together, technology degrees and theology degrees. And I was always worried that, and I really very much resisted doing the theology degree, but I did not want to be a minister. Much respect for ministers, but I didn't think that I was equipped to do that. But I always worried that I wasn't telling children the right thing. Was I teaching, when I did Sunday school, was I teaching them the right thing? And I found godly play, and I discovered that I didn't need to do that, because there was this thing called the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit did it instead of me. So, I guess that is probably, that was about me, but you know, that's enough about me. Have any of you heard of godly play? Because that might be helpful for me to know. Yes. You've heard of it? Yeah. And Fiona's obviously heard of it. But you could put your hands up and I'd admit to it to everybody else a bit more. Yes. Okay, yeah, good. I wonder if you've got any questions about it, and I'll maybe try and answer those as I'm talking, because that might be helpful, so that you get out of this what you need to get out of this, rather than me just telling you about godly play. Because, you know, I can't speak for half an hour on godly play, but, you know, I could probably speak for a whole day on it.
I mean, do you take into account people's different abilities? You know, I mean, there's an awful lot of autistic people for a start. You know, we have different ways of looking at things.
Okay. Yes, thanks.
How is it godly?
How is it godly? Ooh. More questions? No? No more questions about godly play.
As somebody who's never actually heard the expression until
Until, yeah.
perhaps you could just tell us what it
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I can guess what it might be, but I might be wrong, so it'd be useful if, for the benefit of people such as myself, you could just tell us what it actually is.
Right, so I'll go through a whole session. So what do you think it might be?
Acting out scenes from the Bible, but possibly doing it in a more modern context.
Yeah.
But I may be totally wrong, I don't know, that's why I'm asking the question.
I did sit at a conference that the Diocese of St Andrews in Perth and Dunkeld, I think it is, Dunblane, did, and one lady sat like this. And that was what her husband had told her she was coming to. He knew what she was coming to, but she was very angry because he'd made her come and she didn't want to act, and it wasn't that at all. So she was very pleased when she got to the end and nobody had made her act. So yes, I will explain that. Is there any other?
Do you need to have godly toys?
Oh, godly toys.
Following on from that, I've gone as far as looking at the website and thinking, all these resources are terribly expensive.
Oh, yeah.
So, what resources can we use in godly ways?
You've got
Did you look at children to see how they play anyway, to see if they're introducing concepts of God into their play? You know, without the church or any stern factor coming into it. Yeah.
Okay, now I have to be really very honest here. Oh, I'll get Fiona's question first.
We were talking, or Stuart was talking about seeing what's needed locally and interacting with the community. Is this just for church, or is this applicable outside? Do you have to have pre-knowledge, or only for church children?
Church children, don't you just love them? So I have to be really honest, this is not my research. I've been a research assistant on, I think, 5 PhDs now, but I haven't done any of that. I'm not academic myself, and some of them have been engineering degrees, so PhDs. So none of this research is actually mine. I just do this. So if I'm quoting stuff, I'm quoting other people's work.
The very first time I heard the word, the expression, it struck me as inherently old-fashioned.
Ooh.
Godly play sounded like something from the Mennonite community or something. And I thought, this is quite strange, but a new venture to be given such an old-sounding title, and I'm intrigued by that. And I'm hoping to learn a lot more about it.
Okay.
How wrong that impression is, I know.
I think that will keep me going for a little while. So I've written down yours at the bottom there as well. The writing's rubbish, but as long as I can read it, then hopefully that will work. And we are going to do 2 workshops, and I'm really hoping that some of you will come to my workshop and that you won't all go twice to Stuart's workshop, in which case he might come to my workshop and leave you all to talk. And
I'm hoping you will all come to my workshop.
and Fiona's got a question time at the end as well. So, you know, I will answer questions. I promise I will answer questions. So what is it? That might be a good place to start. So it is a methodology. It's a movement, and it's based, as I said, in spirituality and in Christian education. But if I explain what a godly play session involves, that might be a helpful place to start. So a godly play session involves 2 adults, a storyteller, and a door person. Your storyteller is the person who, believe it or not, tells the story. So they're in service to the story and to the circle of people who are coming along, and we talk in circles quite a lot. The door person is a bit like the elder at the door. They say, hello, can I take your coat? If you've got teenagers, can I take your phone? If you've got 3-year-olds, can I take your teddy bear? I'm not going to say what they say with adults. Actually, phones teenagers are not bad with phones. Adults can be quite bad with phones. They ask the question, are you ready? Are you ready to come in? Are you ready to leave the outside world and come in to this session? It's a big thing, being ready in godly play. And changing from the outside world to the inside world. Maybe a bit like coming into church. So people come in, they come in one at a time. Quite often when you're working with children in Sunday school, you open the door and a horde of children come into your space. And they act like a horde of children. When they come in one at a time, they are invited. So I'm going to talk about children, but this is not just for children. When they come in one at a time, they're invited to find themselves a space on the floor to sit down. So there's a lot of floor work if you're working with children. Not everybody can sit on the floor, and I accept that, and there are ways to deal with that and to work with that. Once all of the children are in and they're ready, the storyteller will have been speaking to them as they've come in. They'll have been saying, well, hello Stuart, how's your day been today? Fiona, how was your walk last week that you were going on, that you were talking about? How was your exam? How's life been this week? And then when everybody's there, you wonder if they're ready. Maybe you need to do something to get ready. Maybe you need to have a moment of quiet.
In the session, or where are the adults while this is happening?
So for the session I'm kind of describing just now, it would be only children that would be in that session. For me, that would be a Sunday morning, so the adults would hopefully be in church. Not always. I'm quite happy to babysit any child that comes along. But it might be that circles in a care home and there are no children there. Well, not very young ones.
Right, I can't get the context yet in my head, so that's all.
So if I talk about a Sunday morning to start off with, so instead of Sunday school, if you have that vision for just now, and then I'll move that vision on to other contexts. And those children might be from 3 through to whatever age you lose your children at. Sometimes it's 8 or 10, depending on when rugby starts or sailing starts, or and sometimes it might be when they go to university. Once the children are there, you might do something like have a moment's silence to be ready. I wonder if we need to be ready. I wonder if we need to take a moment to be ready. I wonder if we're actually today, what we might need to do to be ready is maybe we need to sing something. I wonder if there's something that you have that you could sing. So we do something that builds community together. It might be a blessing, it might be a prayer, it might be a song. But it's not coming from the storyteller, it comes from the children, largely. If it's a song, it certainly comes from the children. And then the storyteller will go and find the story, and you can see some of these stories round about here today. They bring the story back to the circle, and they tell the story. And the most important thing in the circle at that point is that story. So these stories are largely, not completely, but largely based in Scripture. So the ones that are over here on this table, these are what we call in Godly Play the sacred stories. So the stories that are the history of the people of God that you find largely in the Old Testament, but there are obviously some New Testament historical things in there as well. Right at the very end, there's the story of Paul. The lovely gold boxes that are at the back there hold the parables that Jesus told. It took me a very long time as an adult to understand that they weren't histories. There wasn't really a woman who took some leaven and there was a woman who took some leaven and put it in some bread and made bread. But Jesus wasn't talking about a historical figure. He was telling a story. He was telling a parable. It took me a very long time to understand that. But that's what's in those boxes, the parables that Jesus told. And there's some stuff which is kind of a bit disparate at the moment, but behind where the storyteller would be, there are things which are about our approach to God. So there would be a Holy Family there. There would be things that were about Christmas, which I have some of here. There would be things that are about Easter, which would be on the other side. So very much the things that are about how we worship and how we go forward or how we approach God. So the storyteller would choose one of those stories and they would tell one of those stories, and it is about that story. So that's where the God in this comes from, that this is very scripturally based, and in particular the RSV. If you look at the words of Godly Play Stories, and you look at the words that are in the RSV, they match up. Mostly. After the story is told, there is what is called wondering. So I wonder which part of the story you like best. I wonder which part of this story is most important. I wonder where you are in this story. So wondering questions. So if you wonder which part of the story someone likes best, there's no right or wrong answer there. It's a very personal thing to them. Which is most important to you, again, is a very personal thing. No right or wrong answer in there. So what Godly Play is doing is setting up a set of questions which is very open. And there are no right or wrong answers. There can be quite left field answers sometimes, but there's no right or wrong answers. There could be some quite subversive answers at times, but they're neither right nor wrong. Yeah, I wonder what the sheep were doing when they were in the sheep pen in the parable of the Good Shepherd. Well, maybe when they were in the sheep pen, they were watching television, and their favourite programme is Doctor Who. Well, maybe they were. Maybe it's home. Maybe those aren't sheep. Maybe those are those children who are sitting on the floor today. Maybe they're seeing themselves there. When the wandering draws to a close, there is more wondering, but it's phrased in a different way. It's called response time or work time. So maybe we've played with the story. We've played with God's work, with God's word, and we need to work with that word now. So the response time is a chance for people to think individually a bit more about what's been said in the story. And it might be that a child doesn't need to work with the story that you've told them today. Maybe they need to go and work with a different story. So I have the creation story with me. I usually always bring it, and of course it's the first one. It starts at the beginning. So I had a girl for 9 years who worked with that story. Every week she worked with that story. She went back to that one. Didn't matter what I told on the floor. She went back to that story. She's now doing astrophysics at St Andrews. So, you know, there's definitely something there. She's done her confession of faith, and she's really, that's the beginning. It's really a big thing for her. It sparks her imagination, and for her, it connects her to the Creator and creation. That work that's done individually doesn't come back to the circle, and it can be a variety of things. I've brought some craft things with me today, but which are the kind of normal craft things that you get, you know, the felt tip pens and the paper and the paint and what have you. But all of the stories are open for people to work with as well. So, as I said, that girl used to go and take down the creation story, and she would lay it out and she would tell it to herself every time we had a work session. And she would look for the creation elements in other stories. I wonder where God's creation is in this story or that story. When the response time, when the work time draws to a close, people are invited back to the circle, and they're invited back to share a feast. So if you're working on Sunday morning with your children, trust me, it's not enough food to spoil lunch. It's a little bit of juice or water, and maybe a grape or a piece of clementine, and maybe one of the small chocolate biscuits that you get, packets of animals and packets of tiny jammy Dodgers go down really well. The thing that makes it a feast is not the amount of food that there is, but that we share it together. Everybody waits, and even small children, actually it's adults who can't do that waiting, but small children know that that's what makes it a feast, and they can wait to do that. Sometimes there's a prayer at that part, and then for us Church of Scotland people, it's a bit like coffee after the service. There's chat then about what's happened in the week, and what's happening next week. So it's that kind of coffee times. Maybe sometimes when you do other work, like you know, we've got communion tomorrow. Are we doing bacon butties, or are we going to do sausage rolls, or are we going to do soup? We're doing bacon butties, but you know. So that kind of decision is made there, or that kind of work is made there. So that's what a full session looks like. While the work is happening, the storyteller is sitting where the storyteller sat for the telling of the story, and is there in service to the group of children, of people who are there. If anybody wants to bring another story, so if my girl wanted her creation story told to her, she didn't want to tell it to herself, she wanted somebody else to tell it to her, then she would come and get that story told. Somebody else might bring something. Sometimes nobody will come and speak to the storyteller. It's a very lonely job at times. The door person is just there to kind of oversee what's happening, to make sure that if there's a spill, it's wiped up. If there's a child who's in need of something, then they can be extracted or helped in some way to do that. So that's where a session is, what it is. And can I tick that one off as well? How is it godly? Yeah?
Answer that one for me.
Yeah, okay, good. So, what is? And how is it godly? Okay, so I'm going to try and do 2 or 3 at one time here. So I have brought resources with me, which you can see here. And you can work with and play with and look at. over lunchtime and over the breaks that we have as well. They are for you to work with. So these are fairly robust things, and they are actually fairly prescribed things as well. So there's a set of resources that goes with godly play. And that's partially because maybe not in Scotland yet, but I dream a dream that if godly play is happening in school, and godly play is happening maybe on a Saturday morning children's club, or on a Wednesday afternoon, or God's gift to certainly the schools in Edinburgh is a Friday afternoon. If you have those kinds of clubs, there's no school in Edinburgh on a Friday afternoon if you're in state school. So God's gift to the churches. If you have those kind of clubs, and children are going to different, or are experiencing godly play in different contexts, then if I bring out the creation story, it's automatically recognisable to them that that's what it is. If I pick up a parable box with a particular colour of dot on it, they know what's in that box. So it's very predictable for those children. The things that might change are the colours that go with the liturgical things. They might be different depending in which church or in which setting that you're in. But the other things should work. So yes, there are godly toys, but they're storytelling objects. And although children are encouraged to play with them and they're encouraged to work with them, they're maybe not toys as such. So you'll see that the Noah's Ark that's there is not a plastic, colourful thing, which is very definitely a toy. That's a really serious story. And it's a really dark story. And it's not really about the fluffy bunnies who go in 2 by 2 into the ark. It's really about cleaning the world. So it's quite serious material that's there. And not a toy. And what people found was if they had that particular object as a toy, then that was how children worked with it. But they work quite differently with an ark. In fact, actually what happens is there's a desert just behind where Stuart's sitting. All of the animals go into the desert. They never did that if it was just a toy. So what resources can you use? I mean, these are the resources. I have very sturdy wooden boxes. You don't need to have a sturdy wooden box for your parable. You just need a gold box. You can have a shoebox that you paint and you put your parable stuff in. I have a wooden one because I fling them in and out of the car, and I would be needing new shoeboxes every couple of months, and my husband wouldn't wear that one at all. And apart from anything else, I keep the shoes in the shoeboxes at home. So you don't have to have really expensive resources. You can spend a huge amount of money on this. If you've got a huge amount of money to spend, you can send off to the States, to the workshops there, and you can buy a godly playroom full of stuff, and it'll cost you £7,000 to £10,000. And that's without training anybody to use it or finding anywhere to put it. But a lot of the things that you're seeing here today have either been made by me or made locally. There's only a couple of things that have actually been purchased from suppliers. So some churches, not my church, but some churches use this as a church community building thing. So I wonder if you could pass me that basket of little people there, Stuart. Yeah. So I wonder if there's anybody in your congregation who could take a little piece of wood and using a jigsaw or a still saw could cut out a person and sand it and maybe wax it. And churches do that. And there's lots of different shapes of little people, as I try not to pick up the same shape of little person. And the next one along, yes, please, thank you very much. There might be somebody who is good with materials, and this is wet felted. It doesn't take, for anybody who wet felts, making one of these doesn't take any skill at all. I know that there are things which you wet felt that take lots of skill, but this doesn't take any skill at all, and it only takes about 15 minutes to do. And it's not expensive to put that together. I'm not going to take the next one. I'll take one of the things from the back here.
There's another example, just a stone.
It is, yes, I found that in Crammond Beach, actually. I'm not sure that you're really allowed to pick things up from Crammond Beach, but I did. But it's just a stone. Yeah, pretending that it's Mount Sinai.
If anyone gets angry, we've got lots of it.
This is the inside of the parable box. So inside the parable box, I have some yellow felt. If you have ladies in your congregation who dressmake, they might have a piece of fabric that you could use. So this doesn't need to be expensive. It can be expensive if you want it to be, but I don't know if anybody wants it to be. So, and I'll pass this round and let people touch these things. These are some of the images that go with one of the parables. This is the parable of the mustard seed, and you'll see in a minute or two that this is cut out from something called foam core. You get the images, you stick them on, and you use a craft knife to cut this stuff out. And it doesn't really, again, take very much in the way of skill to do that. But, you know, it's a nice community activity. Can't do anything about them.
Just realised you were struggling to see.
About how many children would you expect to have? And, you know, is there a limit for 2 adults?
There will be some churches who have policies where if you have X number of children, you have to have X number, you know, so if you've got 5 children, for every 5 children, you have to have an adult. So your 2 adults in those churches will cover 10 children. So you have to go with your policy. You only need 2 adults, but you do have to go with your policy. So in my own church, I work with probably a maximum of about 20 children, which is a lot. 12 is a good number. 6 is a good number. But people do this in schools, and schools' class sizes are bigger than that. Certainly in Edinburgh, they're bigger than that. And there's one lady who does godly play in her local school. And what she does is she has a circle of children on the floor and a circle of children on little chairs round about them. So she's got quite a contained circle, a small circle, but having all of those children there. So I'm kind of thinking it must be talking about between 25 and 30 children in there. The thing about a bigger circle is giving people the space to be able to answer the wondering questions that's the thing about having a bigger circle. Yeah.
Can I be honest with you? I'm really, really struggling to see how almost any group of kids that I can imagine or have worked with in this area would cope with something that is as relatively calm as that. I mean, I can guarantee you that in almost any setting that I would find myself working in, all of these would be pitched around the room in 30 seconds flat. You would have a couple of kids who were screaming and yelling because they can't cope with the group setting. I mean, I think of I'm trying to think around the primary school classes in the local schools that I use and the challenges that I know teachers have in those schools. I think of one class as an example, with 27 kids and 17 of the student additional needs. Now, I don't know how you use this in that setting, because truthfully, somebody would get killed with some of these wooden
Yeah.
toys.
Yeah.
I don't want to exaggerate, but that is my experience of working in current school settings.
So if you felt that was the case, those would be the things that you didn't take with you. And you don't need to have all of this. You can do this with one story. So I have a very dyslexic child. I used to keep them in my own home. I no longer keep them in my own home, I'm very glad to say. I have a very dyslexic child who has ADHD. I have a child who has ADHD and autism. She's very high-functioning autistic. But, she has ADHD and autism. This is the only place that they can sit together without trying to kill one another, and they have put one another in hospital. It's the only place where they're calm. I haven't done this in school because I work in the financial services sector. I don't get a chance to have mornings or afternoons off to go into schools, but I know that this is used in schools where children have autism, where it's not a case of out of 25 children, there's 17 who have special needs. No, it's not really, because this is being used where children are in residential school settings where everyone in that class has additional needs, not just the children who are in the normal school stream. There's a couple of schools in Shetland and in Lerwick where the Salvation Army were taking godly play in, and they really weren't convinced that this was going to work, but they said, could they please come in and tell the Advent story, because they had this, they got the materials, and they would really like to try it in a school setting, and they knew that they weren't going to get into the ordinary primary school, but they asked if they could get into the special needs school. And they came out and they said, that was a disaster, never again, I will never be invited back. And she said she wasn't actually quite in the front door of her house, and the phone was ringing to say, could you please come back next week and do this again? And although she felt it was a disaster because there was lots of noise going on while she was telling the story, what she didn't see was what the teachers and the helpers had seen from round about the outside of the circle, where they were seeing calmness that they'd never seen before. Now, I don't have that experience other than with my own two children, where I see calmness, where I've never seen calmness before. So it does seem to work, and I think it works because of the structure. Because you're not just opening a door and letting a horde of children in, you allow children to come in one at a time, so they are getting themselves ready to do this. And even the children that I have on a Sunday morning, they're not especially well behaved children, they're just children. If anything, they've got too much language and too much learning and too much inquisitiveness to really be comfortable answering some of their questions for me. But I know that this is being used because I've been at courses with people who, and there are trainers who are using this with children who have those real additional needs. Yeah, I don't know how it works either. I promise I don't, but it does.
Alex, I'm just wondering in terms of questioning, how does this work? It's perhaps not a fully answerable question, because if we believe that God is in it, then that's not an answerable question.
Yeah.
And so yes, there's a process, and there's elements of the process that contribute to allowing God to work in the situation. And some of that might be a learned process, and that children maybe find it difficult the first few times, but they come to appreciate it because they're experiencing God in them in a way that they don't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that enables them to be a part of it in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yes. And
We say that
maybe I should have
Jesus Christ be with you, and we somehow expect, well, that's only for adults. That won't work on children.
Yeah. Yeah, and peace is one of the things that you pass around the circle. But one of the things that I haven't told you about that whole process of what godly play is and how you do godly play is that your storyteller has to be ready to tell that story as well. There's a lot of getting ready in godly play, and one of the ways that I become ready to tell a story is I ask God to be present in me. I ask him to be in my words and in my heart and my movements and my understanding. And I acknowledge that this is for God and not for me. So, there is that whole process of doing that. When you were talking there, I was thinking, I did a holiday club. In my very early days of doing godly play, I did a holiday club at one of the churches in Leith, where 6-year-olds were coming on their own without parents. These weren't church children at all. This was just something where they had something to do on a rainy morning. I've got 5 minutes, really? Yeah. And they got fed, which was a big thing in the summer in Leith, and that was the only time that those children were calm and sitting down, was when the godly play story was told, and I was really concerned that wasn't going to happen because I didn't have a huge amount of experience at that point of doing this. So yeah, I guess you're inviting God in. Just for church. So I have talked about doing godly play in schools, so not all children in schools are church children. There are some churches that's their mission work, that they don't have children on a Sunday morning, they don't have children in their church, but they'll go out to the schools and they'll offer to do the school's Christian education for them. And because you ask wondering questions rather than saying, I'm going to tell you what to believe, it's a much more palatable way for non-church parents to accept Christian stories. Because sometimes there's...
I would think that it would be an instant barrier to any head teacher, I know.
The name can be a bit of a barrier, yeah, but I can't think of anything better. So, yeah. I have also used godly play with adults in Bible study. So obviously that's been in a church setting, so house groups and things like that. It's a way of a different way of exploring some of the scripture. I've used godly play in care homes as well. So there's been a big project of godly play and how we can meet the spiritual needs of people who are in care homes, people with dementia, people who are just physically infirm, and how we can continue to meet their needs. And I was part of the early exploration of that process in some of the care homes in Edinburgh. Care homes that were very much Christian care homes, the Church of Scotland care homes, which were full of elderly ministers, and care homes that were just there because they were care homes and people needed to be in them, and a mix of people in some, other ones where you had to go through double doors to get in and be let out again because they were frightened that some of the people would escape. And places just where people were as sharp as pins. So a whole load of work has gone into taking godly play into these places. For that work, it's being called Stories for the Soul. So there is a different name for that, but it is godly play. But that is the work that's particularly for people with dementia. And very quickly, have I got just old-fashioned? This is not new. This comes out of, when anybody sees it, this comes out of Montessori education, which is more than 100 years old. When Montessori did some religious education. And in the 1960s, a gentleman by the name of Jerome Berryman was at Princeton, Presbyterian minister at Princeton, and he was really interested in children's religious education and found what he was given at Princeton very dry, and was told that if that was what he felt about it, then his work was to go and develop it. So I have to say that godly play itself, its roots are older than I am, which is always a bonus. He went in the 1970s to learn to become a Montessori teacher in Italy, and developed that work as a Presbyterian minister, working as a hospital chaplain with children who were in very horrible circumstances, and parents who were in very horrible circumstances, and very much end of life things. But he also had a Saturday morning club with his church, so it developed through there. In the 80s, he went, only in the States, he went to be canon educator in Houston Cathedral, which is an Anglican cathedral. So only in the States can you go from being one to the other. And so godly play has developed out of there. So although it's new to us because we're just really hearing about it, it didn't come across the Atlantic until the early or the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's very gradually working its way up the country. It has its roots much older than that, and I suspect that he didn't know what else to call it. So the one that I haven't answered is the research one, the concepts of God and play. But I think there are probably some books. If anybody wants to read books, there are definitely books that will talk about concepts of God and play. And please come along and experience a godly play story this afternoon. Thank you.